How much would you pay for this house here in Canada? I'll show you the price on this in a moment, but most people outside of Canada have no idea how crazy it has gotten here in Canada. Media doesn't want to cover it for obvious reasons. Now, hundreds of videos on YouTube, you can find people who are lucky enough to be in a position where they can leave Canada. I hate it here. I can't get ahead. These are common complaints you hear from people in the country. And these are the people who can afford to leave Canada, right? When 1 in 5 single Canadians are living in poverty and the use of emergency food banks is up 78% from 2019, which 20% of those people using food banks are working people. Most people can't afford to eat, never mind leaving the country. So let's go ahead and look at that housing. Let's say you want to buy a house, okay? You're not rich. Let's look at that house we looked at earlier. So you decide to buy yourself a fixer-upper. Now, this house is a little bit dated, needs new siding, new garage doors inside, old carpeting, rooms are pretty small, and the lot is tiny. You should be able to afford this. Today, in the paradise of Canada, 1010 West 54th Street in Vancouver can be snapped up for the bargain price of $5.5 million. Then, of course, you have to update, which is another $500,000 easily. Your annual property taxes, $18,780. Now, that's a fixer-upper. What if you have a successful business, you've got some money, maybe you won the lottery, and you want to buy a bit of a nicer home? Here is 1527 Angus Drive. It's a nice house. I wouldn't say it's spectacular, but it's certainly livable. Now, as of today, you could snap up this house for the incredible price of just under $9 million. Maybe that's too cheap for you. Maybe you own a business and you won the lottery and you want something even better. 1316 Connaught Drive looks quite nice. Rooms aren't huge. This is no mansion, but it is a true executive home, kind of nice, and has almost half of an acre. This is a Canadian bargain at only $17.5 million, and your taxes are only going to be $86,000. Now, with these prices, you might think that everyone in Canada must be rich living here, but people became rich only as a result of home ownership. And this is a problem. Why even bother starting a business or doing anything at all for that matter when your house is pretty much paying you $1 million a year? This is a massive disincentive for anyone in Canada who owns a house to do anything, right? This last house we looked at sold in 2012 for $8.5 million. 2 years later, it sold for $2.5 million more at $11 million. Then 4 years later, another $2 million increased to $13 million. 6 years later, today, it's back listed at $17.5 million. That's a $9 million profit over not a whole lot of years. The Canadian economy right now is completely dependent on house prices going up forever, which we know they can't. And if you weren't lucky enough to enter the housing market by virtue of your age or if your parents left you a house, even if you make $2 million a year and have $1 million down payment, you could not afford this house. Now, obviously, in a situation where you have more demand than supply, prices are going to go up. Remaining solution for most people is to rent instead of buying, but a one-bedroom average apartment in the top 5 major cities is now over $2,200 a month, and rent prices have been increasing annually at double digits for years. So maybe you want to leave the city and commute to work. Let's see some of the vehicles. How about a Jeep Wagoneer, only $137,000? More of a pickup truck kind of person? Well, how about a GMC Sierra, only $126,000? It's not rare now to see new pickup trucks over $100,000, and I see people actually driving them. A Jeep Wrangler, only $115,000 in Canada. Now, you could be forgiven for thinking Canada must be paying people quite well in order to afford such crazy prices on real estate and vehicles. The reality is Canadian tech workers, some of the highest paid positions, earn 46% less than their counterparts in the USA. And we don't even have that many tech jobs to begin with. Business starts are super low, despite even back in 2016, studies were showing that Canada was deteriorating into a country of low-wage, part-time jobs. Today, 7 in 10 Canadians say the country is broke, and violent crime been rising every year since 2015. Now, what happened in 2015? I can't recall. Something happened then. Crime is so bad that police are telling homeowners, just leave your car keys at the front door so the thieves won't wreck your place in search of the keys. Homicide rates at an all-time high. Many people don't know this, but recreational pharmaceuticals have been completely decriminalized in parts of Canada. No matter how hard the pharmaceutical, you can legally carry now up to 2.5 grams of any of the hard stuff. And I don't want to say the words because YouTube hates me enough at this point. And the devil's lettuce is completely open and available everywhere. You can walk into any of these stores around the country, or you can grow up to 4 plants of your own. Now, despite record debt and spending our money like a drunken sailor, our government decided to increase the government workforce by 40%. And it still takes, if you've tried to call the government, about 2 hours to get through to speak with any government office. Canadian citizens now have the highest level of debt out of any of the G7 countries. Many people are missing payments on their credit card debts because they're using their cards to pay for food and needed items. This is resulting in many delinquencies. Now, because people couldn't pay their mortgages, banks simply extended the mortgage terms. Canada is the only home of a 90-year mortgage. Now, they've since clamped down on some of that craziness, but still almost 20% of mortgage holders now have 30-year plus mortgages. That was only 2% about a year ago. Now, there are things the government could do, but their position is they don't want to negatively impact the housing market. So if you're a young person who's starting out, basically, you. Now, I'm not even going to go into the cost of groceries and gas because everybody here knows of the suffering firsthand. There are many viral videos online, people comparing U.S. to Canadian costs. Now, the government solution to our suffering was to recently add another tax on fuel that somehow isn't going to drive costs up higher because all the farmers, truckers, and supply chains, they all run on fairy dust. Many people think that a new government is going to solve these problems. To be honest, no government could be worse than what we have in right now, but there are no easy solutions to the problems we have today. Even the most ardent capitalist knows deep down that you can't have infinite growth. There have to be periods of decline. If you look at our global risk landscape, warning bells are going off everywhere. We've got wars, pandemics, record-breaking debt, supply chain stresses, erosion of social cohesion, mental health crisis, inflation, and a whole lot more. Now, the good news is that there are always opportunities regardless of how bad it gets, but most people prefer to ignore the signs.